Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the knockout stage of the Chessable Masters, which is part of the Champions Chess Tour being held on chess.com. Now, there are two events which are part of the Champions Chess Tour, which qualify the players to a grand finale, which is the Esports World Cup being held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia at the end of July. Now, it's a very big event because many players, including myself, have been signed to orgs. As you can see, I'm wearing my Falcons jersey. I'm a member of Team Falcons. You have players like Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano Caruana, who are members of Team Liquid, and many other players who have also been signed. So, with a grand prize of $325,000 in the Esports World Cup chess portion, all the players are trying to qualify. So the format is pretty simple. It's a 16-player knockout, and the first match I'm playing as the strong Russian Grandmaster Alexander Grischuk. Now, another important difference about this event versus a lot of other online events is this is being treated very much in the vein of esports, meaning that the time control is 10 minutes with no second increment for the whole game. You get no more time. You got 10 minutes. That is it. So matches are four game matches. Winner would get 2.5 out of 4 or win in Armageddon tiebreak. All right, let's get to the action. I've spoken a lot, and in the first match I start out with the move b3. Now I play b3, and here we get the move d5 being played by Grischuk. And I do want to highlight one thing. With the time control being 10+0, you want to play for the flow. You want to get into the game. You don't want to be bogged down early and have to use a lot of time. I would also point out that when I played the move b3, one of my great regrets from the recently concluded World Blitz Championship is I thought that b3 would not hold up in a 3+2 time control against the best players in the world. And so it's one recent regret in my mind where I have a what if, maybe that tournament could have been better if I had chosen to play this opening. All right, so I go b3, we get d5, bishop b2, Grischuk plays knight f6, d3, and now we get the move c5. Here I play the move knight d2, knight c6, and now I play knight f3. Now, when I play knight f3 here, what I'm trying to do is stop black from building the big black center with these pawns and the knights guarding everything. So I go knight f3, Grischuk plays queen c7, I play e4, and now he plays the move d4. Here I go c3, we get e5, I swap, and now I play the move rook c1. Now, as you can tell, this opening has gone badly astray for me. This was not my intention. The light bit of prep I did before the round was on a position that was a little bit better than this, because as you can see, we're on move number 9, and already the computer gives black an advantage of nearly 1, meaning black is basically up a pawn. But no increment, you keep going. So we got the move bishop d6. I play bishop e2, castles, and now Grischuk plays the move queen e7. Here I play the move knight c4, trying to put pressure on these pawns and the bishop at the same time. Grischuk plays bishop e6, I trade, and now I play the move queen c2. Now this is the start of an erroneous plan. When I played queen c2, I expected Grischuk to play rook c8, but I simply misevaluated this position after queen c5, where black can trade the queens, go knight d7, hitting the rook and guarding the pawn, and after rook c1 and the move knight b4, this pawn on a2 is weak, the pawn on b3 is weak, and black is already contesting the c file, so black is much better. Computer actually says after the move queen d2, let's say rook a c8, now I can play knight g5, bishop d7, and after the move f4, white is very much in the game. So I go queen c2, Grischuk plays rook c8, and now I play this move knight to d2 here. What I'm trying to do is simply hunker down, defend the position, get him low on time, and hope for a window of opportunity. So Grischuk plays b5 here, a nice move to stop me from jumping to c4 with the knight, and now I play the move queen b1. Grischuk goes h6, and here I play the move rook c2, intending to double stack the rooks on the c file. Grischuk plays knight b4, I swap, and I play the move rook c1, we get another swap, and now we have the move queen c5. Now in this position, I have the two Bs, or the bishop pair, but because the diagonals are very closed, for example, this diagonal is not open, this diagonal, there's nothing to spy on, and this bishop on c1 also very, very passive. If I go to b2 here, you'll notice that I'm staring at a pawn chain. So even though I have the two Bs, the Bs are very passive, and black is just much better. So I play the move bishop to a3. Grischuk plays a5, trying to reinforce the horse here on b4, and now I play the move knight f3. Grischuk plays knight d7 here, trying to overprotect the pawn on e5, and now I go knight e1. We get queen c3, bishop b2, queen c7, and now I play the move h4. Now what I should have done here is I should have played the move f4 here, trying to attack this black center. I actually did not see this move at all, and it's kind of shocking that I missed this, because if black takes, I simply win the pawn on d4, and now you'll notice that the diagonals are slowly opening up. Let me just give you a sample line, something like this, and now you'll notice that both the bishops are well placed. I have pawns in the center, and white is much better. So instead I play h4, Grischuk goes knight c5, and now I play the move bishop a3. Now for a second time in a row, I missed this move f4, and I have one simple explanation for this, which is that I was very nervous going into this game, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to qualify for the grand finals, but I need a top 12 finish, meaning that I must win this match in order to give myself good chances. So I play the move bishop a3, Grischuk goes knight a6, and now I play bishop c1, Grischuk goes b4, and at this point I am in huge trouble here because now all the diagonals are clogged, and more importantly, black has one very simple idea of getting the knight to b5, and if you get the knight to c3, we have a pyramid of Giza here with the pawn and the knights forking everything, and black is just completely winning. So at this point, I have to come up with a plan. Grischuk wants to move the queen, get this knight to b5 and c3, so I have to take drastic measures. Now, the one good thing, of course, is because it's 10+0, I've been moving pretty quickly and I've accumulated a 2-minute time advantage. So I play the move bishop d2. Grischuk goes queen d6, intending to play knight c7 and knight b5, and now I play the move h5. We get knight c7, and now I play the move f4. Now, initially, I wanted to go f4 in one go, but after takes, queen c1, black can play the move g5, overprotecting this pawn on f4, and I'm simply down a pawn with no compensation to show for it. So I go h5, knight c7. Now, of course, after f4, if black were to take the pawn, I can go queen c1. If black goes g5, this is a severe blunder because of the classic end peasant glitch move. I take the juicer, and after takes, suddenly I'm hitting everything with the bishop. The queen hits the knight on c5, and white is very close to winning. So after queen c1, Grischuk goes knight b5, trying to jump to c3 with the horse. I take the pawn, and now he plays the move queen b6. Now, this move is technically the best move, but in retrospect, due to the time situation, I think the move that Grischuk should have played was this move queen to f8, because the queen simply guards the pawn, and I cannot go for counterplay by sacking a bishop. Let's say knight f3, knight c3, queen c2, for example. After a move like queen d8 guarding the pawn, you've got the knight on c3, you have the pressure on this pawn. Black is just much better, and white is the one who has to come up with a plan. Now, keep in mind, queen b6 is the correct move, and I think if this were a game being played with increment, this move is actually optimal. But because we're not playing with increment after the move queen b6, now I can try to muddy the waters, complicate the situation, and my opponent only has 2 minutes left on the clock. So here I sack the bishop, he takes, and now I play the move queen takes pawn. Grischuk plays queen d8 here, and now I go knight f3, trying to bring my horse to the king side to try and checkmate the king on g8. Grischuk plays knight c3, I go bishop f1, and now he plays the move knight d7. Now, Grischuk has found some really good moves here. If we go back to this point, you'll see it's 207, but the problem is, even though he's played the best move on the last 3 turns, now he is down to 1 minute 14. He spent a minute, and his clock is ticking. So I go e5 here. Grischuk plays queen f8, I play queen g5, he goes king h8, and now I play the move queen f4. Now at this point, black is winning, but the big issue is that it's not a situation where you can trade the pieces off instantly, so you still have to use time, and it's really a race against the clock for Grischuk. So he plays queen g7. I take the pawn on d4, he takes on e5, I check, we get king g8, and now I play the very slippery move knight to c6. Now the reason this move is so slippery is that it looks like a pure blunder on the surface of it because of what Grischuk will play in the game, which is queen c5, checking the king and winning the horse. But in this position, when I played knight takes d4, I'd already foreseen what was going to happen in the game, but also in this position, it's a matter of time. Grischuk is 52 seconds here, and in my heart of hearts, I believe that if Grischuk were able to play bullet mode and find the best move queen to f6 in let's just say 2 to 3 seconds and keep himself around 50 seconds on the clock, he probably would win this game. I feel, however, if Grischuk were to use 10 to 15 seconds and play queen f6 and we get this position and he's like 35 seconds or 40 seconds, I think I would probably be able to swindle him and win the game. So this is really a critical moment where the no increment plays a huge role. So Grischuk ends up playing queen c5 after an 13 second think, and now I play the move d4, and here Grischuk takes a knight. Now, if Grischuk were to move the queen back to f8, which is the best line, after takes, and knight takes a5, the game goes on. Probably here I would play queen f4 just to keep the queens on the board to try to get the flag. So Grischuk takes the knight. But now I check, and after king f8 here, I play this move queen to d8. Now, I could have played h6 right away, but remember, with no increment, every little bit of time that you can work off your opponent's clock can pay dividends. So I throw in the little tickle. Grischuk goes back, but now after the move h6, he's gone from 36 seconds down to 34 seconds. He has 2 less seconds on the clock, and already here it's actually very tricky to play. Now the computer shows a miraculous drawing line here with the move queen to b6, and after queen g7, king e7, it looks like after h7, queen guards a square, I'm getting a second queen, and it's GG, why not? But the computer shows an amazing draw where black can sack a horse, and after takes here, white gets a second queen, but after takes king h1, black can just start yo-yoing with the queen between a1 and e5, checking this king, and the game will end in a draw. If white were to play queen g3, black has the fossil with knight g4 checking the king and hitting the queen after takes. Now black is probably a little bit better. But with 34 seconds, this is a line that I think frankly is impossible to see, and Grischuk panics and plays move queen e4 after a 4-second thing, and this is a huge error, as now it allows me to play the move queen to d8, checkmating the king on f8. Grischuk walks into a checkmate in 1, king has no squares available, and I win the first game of the match to take a 1-0 lead. Now, I would win the second game very comfortably with black. I felt that Grischuk played a little bit too quickly in the second game because he knew that he would struggle if he got low on the clock. And then in the third game, I would draw to win the match by a very clean score of 2.5 to half. Now, this really highlights the difference between increment and no increment, because if this were a game with increment, I probably would have lost this game and maybe the match as well. But at any rate, I get the win and I move on to the next match where I'm playing against the quarterfinals, I should say, where I am playing against Grandmaster Jan Nepomniachtchi, the recent co-winner of the World Blitz Championship in New York City. Now, first game of the match, it's still best of 4, 10+0, and again, I open with the move b3. Nepo plays d5, bishop b2, knight f6, and this time I correct my error by playing knight f3 instead of repeating the game against Grischuk with d3. So I go knight f3, we got bishop f5, knight h4, and now we have the move bishop to d7. Here I play the move c4, important moment because I'm trying to use this diagonal, but because the bishop is on d7 here, black cannot go for the classic Ben Oni with d4 as I take the pawn and the bishop is in the way. This is also why if we go back here, after bishop c8, say I go c4, now black can play d4 as the queen guards the pawn, and after knight to f3 and c5, black is already a little bit better. So I go c4, we get e6, play the move knight f3, c5, e3, knight c6, and now I trade the pawns on d5. Here I play bishop e2, and now we get the move bishop d6. Now, many moons ago, all the way back in the period from 2015 to 2016, I actually played this position from both sides quite frequently. I remember a very specific game in the Grand Chess Tour in Leuven that I had against Wesley, but there is one important distinction. This bishop is on d7 versus c8. So the normal way you would get a position like this is something like this. You get e6, e3, c5, c4, knight 6, takes bishop e2, and at bishop d6 and white castles, you'll notice the bishop is on c8 versus the game where it's on d7. And for that reason, here black can actually play the move d4, and black is doing fine. But in my game today, when we get this position after castles, if black goes d4 here, I can simply take the extra pawn because these bishops are in the way of the queen, whereas in the other line, just to go back for 1 second, if white were to say takes, here there's bishop takes h2, checking the king, and then you capture the bishop. So I make a slight inversion here to get this position with the bishop on d7 versus c8, and now after castles, Nepo castles is king. I go d4, we get takes, and now we get the move rook e8. Here I play the move knight d2, Nepo plays a6, and now I go rook c1. Now this position is pretty balanced, but there is one important point about it, which is the pawn structure. Now you'll notice that black has a pawn on d5, blockaded by the horse on d4, and this is what we call the classic isolated pawn position here. This pawn can be a weakness or a strength depending on how black plays. So Nepo goes queen e7, I play queen c2, and honestly at this point in the game I was already feeling really groovy about my chances, because with no increment and a lot of easy moves to play, you'll notice I'm already building the advantage on the clock. So Nepo plays rook c8. I trade the knights, takes with the rook. He could have taken with the pawn potentially, but it does possibly give me the option to take the pawn on a6. So we get rook takes. I go back to b1, we get rook c8, I trade, and now I play the move rook d1, intending to move my knight to f3, where the rook will target the pawn, but also my knight can reroute to the center of the board. We get bishop e5, I play takes, and now I go knight f3, queen c3, and I play the move knight d4. Now after rook to c8, the position here is balanced materially, but because I'm blockading this isolated pawn, if anybody is better here, it is white. So I go bishop f3, trying to target the pawn on d5 with my bishop, and now we get the move a5. Here I play h3 to create the classic Luft for the king, as the Germans would say. If you were to play a move like queen to d3, just to show you a sample line, let's just say knight e8, bishop takes d5. After rook c1, it's spaghetti-o. The king is trapped behind the pawns, and this is what is known as a classic back rank checkmate, or the ice skater checkmate as well. So I play the move h3 here. I don't want to get ice skater. I want to escape with the king to the edge, and now we get the move g6. Here I play the move knight to e2, and now my plan is very obvious. My bishop and my rook are spying the pawn. My knight can also go to f4 to reinforce the attack as well. So we get the move queen e5. Now I play queen to d3. My queen, my bishop, and my rook are all targeting the pawn. I can even put the knight on f4, and now every single one of my forces are going after this isolated pawn on d5. So we get b5 here from Nepo, and this is a mistake here, and I actually played the move queen d2 relatively quickly, and in retrospect I thought I should have probably taken the pawn. But when I played queen d2, my idea was simple. I'm targeting the pawn on a5, I'm targeting the pawn on d5 to create the classic 90-degree right triangle, and after black goes b4, now I can take this pawn, and I thought that after the trade, let's say black were to trade everything down, here the bishop is under attack, and when you move the bishop, I win the pawn on a5, and I'm up 2 pawns and I win the game. Whereas in the other variation after b5, if I take here, in this position, the bishop is guarding the pawn, so after bishop to e8, for example, I don't win any of these pawns on the 5th rank. So I play queen d2 and then I take, and now Nepo plays move bishop f5. This is a serious error. The computer wants to move bishop to b5. I will also point out that much like my Grischuk game, I was under the impression that my opponent thought that he was at a big disadvantage on the clock here, because when you look at the time usage, both of us have used very little time, only 2.5 minutes, but we're pretty deep in the game, and I think Nepo had basically told himself in his mind that he was not going to get into time pressure, he was not going to risk getting flagged, so he'd play as quick as he could, and hopefully things would work out. So we get bishop f5. Now I play the move bishop to c4, slamming the door shut on the file for the rook. We get knight e4, and now I play the move queen d4. We get the trade. Nepo plays rook d8, and now after the move rook to a1, the dust has settled. I'm simply up an extra pawn here on e3, and I'm intending to go a3 and open up the file for my rook. We get bishop d7. I play a3, knight d2, and now I take on b4. Nepo trades knight for the bishop, takes on b4, and now I play the move rook b1. Now I remain up 1 extra pawn, this pawn on e3, but it's also a position where it's a knight versus a bishop, so at this point from a technical perspective I should win the game. We get rook b8, king f1, king f8, e2, e7, d3, d6, and now I play the move rook a1. Now the thing about bringing the king to the center here is I'm going to need my king to stop this passed pawn before I can activate the rook on the file. So I go rook a1. Nepo plays rook b7. If he were to go b3 here after king c3, b2, rook b1, I'm just going to win this pawn on b2. If you play rook b7, let's say we get the trade, now I have 2 extra juicers and the knight will outplay the bishop. If Nepo were to play king c5 here, for example, I can go knight b3, checking the king, take the juicer, 2 extra pawns in this situation as well, and the rest will be very basic. So we get rook b7. Now I play the move king c2, we get h5, and here I play the move h4, trying to fix my pawns on the opposite color of the bishop. Now say I go king b3 when we get h4, you'll notice that these pawns on g2 and h3 can be targeted by the bishop. It is on the light squares, same as the pawns, and I just don't want to allow that. So when I go h4, my dream position is to put the pawn on g3, and now you'll notice that here all these pawns are on the opposite color of the bishop. The bishop is not touching anything here, and now I can try to win this pawn on b4. So I play h4, Nepo goes king e7, king b3, f6, and now I play the move rook a6. Nepo plays bishop to e8 here, and I do give Nepo credit because he does set up a nice idea, which is if I ever push c5 to push p with the c pawn, now the bishop can hit the king from the other diagonal, and black is still probably losing here, but it's not as clear cut. So after bishop e8, I play the move g3 here, putting all my pawns on the dark squares. Also g3 will always guard the pawn on h4, and now we get bishop d7. Now Nepo could have played something like bishop f7, but after knight c6, forking the king and the pawn, after the king goes, I take 2 extra pawns. Again, easy peasy lemon squeezy. So Nepo plays bishop d7. Now I go c5 because the bishop cannot go to f7 to check the king. We get bishop to e8, and now I play the move rook e6, king f7, and I swing the rook over to b6, offering the trade of the towers. Now if black were to trade, the game ends instantly. The bishop can't go to the square, knight covers, and otherwise I push p with the pawn, get a queen, promote, and it's all over. So Nepo plays rook a7. Now I play the move c6, and at this point Nepo decides to resign the game. Of course I could take the pawn on b4, but ultimately with my king in front of this pawn is going nowhere, and if I can push the c pawn through, I will win. Now the reason Nepo resigned here is say he plays a move like rook a1, I can go check, king f8, and now after knight e6, king g8 here, I play rook g7, king h8, c7, no square for the bishop, you have to go rook c1 to stop the pawn, and after rook to e7, let's just say bishop b5, king b4, I'm just marching the king up the board. Their ideas like rook e8, too many pawns, too easy to play, and that's why I get the win. So after c6, I get a resounding win in the first game of the quarterfinal match. I think quarterfinal match against Nepomniachtchi, and that means I take a 1-0 lead. Now we're going to take a look at the second game. We're going to start from a little bit deeper in the game, and this is a situation where I want to highlight one of the big differences between increment and no increment. Now we're going to pick it up on move number 40 here after knight to h5. At this point, black has one extra pawn. You have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and white has 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now here I'm up a pawn. I'm also up 30 seconds, and let's get into the action. We have queen to e8 being played. I hit the knight on h5. Nepo goes g4 guarding, and now I play the move queen g6. Now you'll notice here that I actually start to panic. On these last two moves, I go from 2.5 minutes to 1:28. But the important point is that with no increment, all I need is the flow. If I can find easy moves, I have great chances. So we get king g3. I take the pawn, queen e2, knight c5, and now we have the move knight d2. Here I play bishop e7, queen f3, king g8, queen e2, and now I play the move queen f7. Now Nepo plays king to h3 here. If he were to play any other move, let's just say f3 for example, I have g6, and it's uh-oh spaghetti-o time. The knight is trapped on h5. I'm going to win the horse and the game. So we get king h3. I play bishop d6 here, and at this point I spend 20 seconds before playing this move, and it's getting very, very dicey because here I am down nearly 30 seconds on the clock. But the important point is there is no increment. So even if I use a little bit of time here, if I can play my moves at tempo very, very fast at the end, I still should be fine. So we get knight c4. I play d3, queen e3, and now I play the move g6, knight g3, and here I play the move queen f4. Now another important point here is that Nepo spends 20 seconds before playing knight g3, and while he's using the time to think, I was preparing my next move. So while he was getting ready to move knight, I was already hovering over the f4 square with my queen in case he moved the knight. So he goes here, I play this in 1 second, queen e1, and now I play the move knight b3. We get queen d1, I go back, queen e1, and now I play the move king g7. Now it is a very tricky spot here because I could try to make a repetition with knight b3, but I feel that in these situations with no increment, I should be better than my opponents, and so I play king g7. We get h5, I go g5. I do not trade the juicers here because after knight takes h5, the knight forks the king and the queen, and I resign the game. So I go g5 here. You'll also notice the pawn on e6 stops the knight from ever going to f5. So it's all about the d pawn in the middle of the board. We get king g2. I take. Nepo plays queen a1, and now I play the move queen f4. We get the move queen to a8, and here I push my p with this move pawn to d2. Now, as I said, one of the reasons I think I'm really good in this format with no increment is that my intuition, my moves that I make in 1 to 2 seconds, I think are simply better than most of my opponents. I think this bears truth because of how I've done in a lot of the bullet events. When you have to make moves in 1 to 2 seconds, you'll notice that even though I'm way down here after g5, Nepo starts to make blunder after blunder after blunder because we are essentially playing bullet. So we get this position after d2. Nepo plays queen a1. I take here. You'll notice that I'm still down 14 seconds, but I have enough time to solve it. Nepo makes a final blunder with knight takes bishop. If he were to trade the knights after takes and king g3, I would go queen to e1. Pawn guards the queen. I'm threatening to push my p and get a second queen, and white has no checks. And with 28 seconds, there's no way that I'll get flagged. So Nepo plays knight takes d6, and now I play the move queen takes f2 very quickly, checking the king here on g2, and Nepo resigns the game because if he goes to h3, queen takes g3 would be checkmate, and if he goes to h1, I play knight takes knight, checkmating the king in the corner of the board. So I win this game, meaning that I take a 2-0 lead in the match. I would also go on to win the third game as well to get a clean sweep by a score of 3-0. This means that I move on to the semifinals tomorrow, where I will be playing either Fabiano Caruana, my countryman from the United States, or Alireza Firouzja from Iran, who is currently representing France. So a very, very exciting start. I get 2 big match wins. This means I get a lot of points towards finishing the top 12 to qualify to the Esports World Cup. Very pleased overall with my play. Glad that my general feel about no increment has proven to be correct so far, but there is still a lot of work left to be done as I try to chase down the event and get a big dub. So on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the first couple of matches of the Chessable Masters, which is part of the Chess Champions Tour and a qualifying event for the Esports World Cup, which will be held in Saudi Arabia later this year. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with some more great recaps in the coming days. Hope you guys enjoyed it and have a great rest of your day. See you soon. Bye.